Welcome to Sasquatch and Sourdough, the podcast where we embark on a journey into the depths of the unknown.
The mystery of life.
Weaving together threads of ancient scripture.
What do you mean, biblical?
Tales of high strangeness.
Tell them about the Twinkie.
Whether you're a seeker of truth,
We believe it's the heart of the house.
or simply hungry for a good story,
What about the Twinkie?
Sasquatch and Sourdough invites you to join us on a journey of discovery, wonder, and deliciousness.
They feel your methods, your theories are...
Spooky.
So grab your backpack, sharpen your senses,
Do you think I'm spooky?
and prepare to explore the sacred mysteries of our highly strange world like never before.
And that is the whole problem with aliens.
Well, welcome back to Sasquatch and Sourdough. I am your host, Christina, and tonight I have a really exciting guest. I have my new friend, April from Crime to Burn. Welcome, April.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. April and I have been chatting on Instagram for like many months.
Many months.
And if you guys follow, you should be following us on Instagram. You will notice that I'm always like reposting her stuff to our stories because I just absolutely love her podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. You just I love a good crime drama. I love a good murder mystery. So this is definitely going to be a little bit different of an episode, but I don't think, my audience really, they don't care anymore. Like they know we're going to do something weird. And so your podcast is so different because it's arson, and it's people setting people on fire.
Yes. So when I decided to do a true crime podcast initially, I wanted to do one for a while, but it's such a saturated market that I was like, what is it that I could actually bring to the table that other people aren't bringing to the table? And obviously it's a little embarrassing how long it took for me to think of it. I am a fire expert. I've been a fire protection engineer for over 20 years, and I was a firefighter briefly. So I thought I can bring the perspective of a fire expert to criminal fire cases. And not all criminal fire cases are arson. There's also fires that have really large losses of life and really large property losses that are the result of criminal negligence and not just arson. So we cover all kinds of criminal fires, not just intentional arson.
That is such a cool job, for one.
It has its days, though, like every job.
Yeah, I'm sure. And thank you for your service, because that's obviously an amazing service that you are providing. I'm definitely the kind of person, at least in our house, that I'm like unplugging everything, and I'm like, that's good. That's fire hazard, fire. Because my dad was a high voltage electrician for BG&E for a long time, so everything was like, that's a fire hazard, and don't sit on the green boxes outside because they can blow up. So I was just like kind of waiting for things to blow up and set on fire as a kid. So I definitely appreciate your expertise.
You know, what's funny is that I'm the fire protection engineer, but my husband is the one that buys all of the fire extinguishers and makes sure there's one like basically every 10 feet through our house. Like you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a fire extinguisher in our house. So he's definitely, when he moved in with me at our old house, I think I had like 2 fire extinguishers and they were really old, and he was horrified. He's like, what kind of fire protection engineer are you? And so he stocked us up. We have fire extinguishers all over the place now.
Now he's like your safety patrol.
He is. He makes sure that I do a good job, although he does joke that I'm such a good fire protection engineer that I have trouble lighting our wood stove. And he's not wrong. I do.
No. It's all about like kindling, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, like, usually if I have to light the wood stove, it's because I was supposed to put logs in it. And I forgot. And so I've let it burn down too far. And then you've only just got like a few coals left. And I'm like, oh, we can start it from that. And I'll just dump like logs that are too big.
But I'm really bad at like, I just think everything can just burn. I'm just like, here, let's just burn this plastic. Let's like outside. We don't have a wood stove.
Okay.
But like outside and like fires, my husband's like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, we're gonna burn all this because it's fire night. And he's like, that's disgusting. Like, you can't just burn whatever you want. Like, we're not burning trash.
I advise against burning the plastic. That's the toxic gases and stuff. And not a good.
Yeah. Well, not like actual like bottles of plastic stuff, like not like trash like that, but like,
okay.
You know, like the plastic that comes on the wood and stuff. If it's still on there, I'm just like, or if there's like weird, I guess like plastic on envelopes, because I will burn paper. So that I'm just like, okay, let's throw all this mail and these bills and just going to have a good old bonfire. He's like, we're going to, have toxic fume fire. Which actually is a fun tie-in, because the reason I've been dying to get you on here just because I love your content and I love your podcast.
Well, thank you.
But I was at first like, oh man, there's got to be like some weirdo tie-in. Like, how can I introduce my audience? And then you covered a case in, now all of my Pennsylvania listeners out there, Centralia. I'm sure that you probably have heard of it. So I was so excited, and I've listened to it, I told you, like twice all over, because it is a fire that continues to burn.
Yes, the fire is officially old enough to collect Social Security now. It is 62. It will be 63 this May 2025. And, you know, a lot of people initially asked me, like, why are you covering Centralia on a true crime podcast? And I was like, oh, you'll have to listen to find out.
Exactly.
But there's several different theories of how the fire may have started. And the most prevalent theory, and the one that I think that holds the most weight, the one that has the most evidence to support, is the idea that the city council approved lighting a fire in a trash dump. And the intention was to run all the rats out of the dump and to handle the smells before their Memorial Day parade. The problem is that the trash dump was in an old strip mine, and there was openings from the old strip mine into the underground mine tunnels. Now, those openings were supposed to have been sealed up prior to operating the landfill. But whether they weren't sealed up because of negligence or just human error or whatever, there was still openings. And so the assumption is that there's a really great author named David DeCock, and he uncovered receipts showing that they paid firefighters for standby that day. And so that's why I think that's what started the fire. And it was actually illegal in Pennsylvania at the time to have dump fires like that. So
really?
If you believe that that's how the fire started, it was an intentional dump fire intended to take care of smells and rodents, then you believe it's a criminal fire because they weren't supposed to light a fire at that time.
And it's just, I mean, I actually first heard about Centralia when I went to a community college, and I was an environmental science major. And one of the trips was going to be to go to Centralia because it's not far from like Baltimore. You know,
wait, you got to take field trips in college?
Yeah. Well, this was community college, and it was environmental science, and it was my favorite teacher ever. His name was Dr. Schochner.
Oh, that's a great name.
He was fantastic, and he was like just total like ex-hippie, and he just like, you know, he just had the best like teaching style, and I loved him. And yeah, that's how I learned about it. Was like, I never actually went there. So I missed the field trip for whatever, I don't know, who knows, whatever reason, when I was like 19. But it was just such a mystery. It was, and I think at that time when we were learning about it, it was definitely more like the environmental impact and just like, okay, well, isn't this crazy? Like this fire was started in the 60s, and now it's an underground fire. And people live
still
going. And it's still going, and people live there.
Yeah, there are currently. I talked to somebody that lives right outside Centralia. She's on TikTok, and she actually lives in not an abandoned church, like not like she's a squatter, but she and her husband bought an abandoned church and turned it into their home.
Oh, that's right.
And she told me that because the last census records from 2020 show that there was 5 residents, and I asked her how many homes are still there, because anytime any of the residents pass away, their home gets demolished because of the agreement that was made for them to stay. They can't leave. They got a payout for their land, and they can't leave their property to any future generation. So there's still 5 homes there. So we assume there's still 5 residents. But that was based on the last census in 2020.
So then they can't like go back and like cause like any like they can't have any like probable cause for like suing or anything if anything happens to them like medically, because they're is it like they're refusing to leave kind of, or?
So what happened is that it was a really big controversy because the dump was actually outside of the city limits, and the way that the laws were written, and Centralia took advantage of this, allowed the city to own the mining rights, or the town to own the mining rights directly below the town, and that was intended to keep people from strip mining, the land out from under people's houses.
Right.
But these houses were already built on top of active mines, but now that the town owned the rights. So when the fire started, the town didn't actually have any jurisdiction where the fire actually started, because it was on land that was outside of the town limits, and they didn't have the finances to fight a mine fire. Mine fires are a big deal. So they sort of tossed it to the state and expected the state to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't get involved in what the state was doing for a really long time. So we go through, like, I don't want to go through the whole shebang.
Yeah, I want people to like go to the episode because it's amazing.
But what ended up happening was they had multiple failed attempts to control the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And as they realized that the fire was impacting the residents of the town and was dangerous now, they had choices to make. They needed to decide whether they were going to spend money to try to save as much of the town as possible, which meant like half the residents of the town were going to lose their homes instead of all of them, or if they were going to accept a buyout. And the people that were in harm's way right now, whose families could potentially die in their sleep from carbon monoxide poisoning, they wanted the fastest answer. And they knew if they waited to try to get approval for a trenching project that would leave half the town remaining, it could be another year before they got approval and funding and everything. It could be another year before they got bought out of their homes, and they needed out now. So there was a lot of pressure in the town for people to accept the buyout. I apologize if you can hear my dog.
Oh,
in
no.
the background.
You're fine.
There was a lot of pressure for people to accept the buyout because there was people's lives that were in immediate danger. So the one thing that the government did right was when they did the buyout, they prevented the homes from being depreciated because of the mine fire. Because originally, based on the way the law was written, the town real estate should have been devalued 30% because of the mine fire.
Right.
Excuse me.
Right.
So it wasn't, which was great for the people that lived there. But because of that, and there was a lot of disagreements, this sort of started like almost like a little in-town civil war between people that wanted to leave and people that wanted the town to be saved.
Do you want to like back up and kind of just tell like the beginning of the story? Because I know there's like one part that I was really excited about, but if you want to just like give us highlights, because it's a three or 4 parts.
I think it's 5 parts.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So April went super deep into this because there's just so many, as you can tell, so many layers. But if you want to just kind of give us like how it started, and I know that little boy, that was like a big story too. So
so we know that the fire started most likely from a fire in the dump that was intentionally set, and then when they realized that they had a fire in the mines underground, they threw it to the state, and then the state undertook several projects to try to control it. And the people in the town really turned a blind eye to it. And they were like, the state's, we don't know what's going on. And it wasn't until there was a little boy named Todd Dombowski, and he was in his grandmother's backyard, and something called a subsidence, which is basically like a sinkhole caused by a mine fire or caused by mining, where anywhere there's like a void under the ground, opened up all the way up to the surface, and Todd fell into it over top of an active fire.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, like he said, he could look down and see the fire below him, and he is scrambling, as the basically the earth below him is turning into like almost like liquid, right? Like, and he's trying to scramble to grab anything, and his hand happened to find a tree root.
Oh my gosh.
And he was able to hold on to that tree root until his cousin could yank him out. He was only in the hole for about 40 seconds. But he reportedly had like lifelong trauma. Like he couldn't stand to have blankets over top of him when he was sleeping and things like that, because of this incident that happened. And that was what first made it unavoidable for the people of Centralia to recognize that the issues that they were having weren't the result of mine fire gases that were just traveling underground under their town, that the fire was actually going under their town.
Do you know the history of the mines?
Well, a little bit. So this area of Pennsylvania is anthracite coal, which is different than the bituminous coal that we see mined throughout other parts of Appalachia. And the way that the anthracite coal is, a lot of the bituminous regions, the mines are very flat. But in the anthracite region, the anthracite veins, if you imagine like inverted bowls that are stacked in each other.
Okay.
So it makes like a parabolic curve going down deep into the earth. And that made it really difficult because a lot of the methods that they had to fight mine fires at the time don't work in steep slopes. And we're talking slopes in excess of 30 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And instead of just having like a flat area that they've mined out, in order to reach all the levels that these slopes are going to, they had like tunnels that were stacked on top of each other, and they would have shafts that would interconnect them here and there. So it made this a much more challenging fire than the fires that we see in the bituminous regions. And even in the bituminous regions, there's records of fires that were 80 years.
Oh my gosh.
Being fought and stuff. So, anytime you have a mine fire, whether it's anthracite coal or bituminous coal, you have a problem. But there was just so many additional challenges, and not the least of which was the fact that Centralia was a very small, not politically powerful jurisdiction. And if they'd had more political clout, they may have gotten more support from both the state and the federal government.
Just like a small mining town. When you were telling that, I just get a picture of this little boy, like literally like falling into a hell pit.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
It is crazy. And, I was thinking about
gosh,
like after he gets pulled out, like his grandmother calls his mom and is like, you need to bring some clothes over for him and stuff. And I was just thinking like, this was so like pre-Gen X, like,
right?
Because like even in Gen X, like if we fell into a pit in the ground, our parents would have had more to say than bring over some clean clothes.
Right.
But this was this was in 1980. So it was just a very,
I was born in 82. So yeah, I mean, I could just imagine like my grandmother being like, just bring her some clothes. She fell in the pit.
And Gen X kids grew up different.
It's different. Like are you a Parks and Rec fan?
Mm-hmm.
Like remember the pit? Like
yes.
the trash dump that he lived in. Like everyone's fallen in the pit.
Yeah. And there's actually 2 movies that were inspired by Centralia.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
that's
it's
right.
a fun little bit of trivia. The first one is a comedy, and the second one's a horror. So the comedy is Nothing But Trouble, the movie with Chevy Chase and Demi Moore.
I love that movie.
My husband makes
John
me watch
Candy.
it. Like,
it's so creepy. It's the creepiest movie.
It really is. It's funny though.
Oh,
my husband loves it
because it's a trash family. That's right. Oh my gosh.
So it was loosely based on Centralia.
Yes.
And then the horror movie was Silent Hill, which came out in 2006.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like there was a Maryland tie-in. I don't know what I might be misremembering.
I have to confess that I've never seen Silent Hill.
Okay.
So I don't.
Well, it was a video game too. So I remember like the video game. Yeah. Like that was like super creepy. And I feel like I saw the movie. And that, when I look, because then I was listening to your episode and I was like, oh yeah, I should probably rewatch that because now I don't remember. But oh my gosh. Oh, that Chevy Chase movie.
That's a great movie. If anyone hasn't seen it and you just need like a silly, like depart from reality for a night movie, that's a good movie for that. Have a couple drinks because it
like 80s. It's weird. It's weird.
It's a weird.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, oh my gosh. But just now I'm sorry. Now Parks and Rec's in my head.
Sorry.
The Pit. No, that's my favorite show ever. I'm totally Leslie Knope. I just want to save the pit. Like, okay. So unfortunately, a little child falls into the pit of hell and then is saved by a root. Praise God. So what happens? Like, so they finally, like, it lights a fire under at least the county.
Well, what had been happening leading up to Todd Dombrowski falling into the pit was that more and more residents were having suspicious things happening in their houses. Their plants were turning brown and dying, like seemingly overnight. One couple, their pilot light for their furnace went out, and they tried to relight it, and they couldn't keep a match lit in their basement. And so they went upstairs and actually lit some newspaper. And as they were bringing the newspaper down to try to light it, the newspaper went out halfway down the stairs. And so that started to make people think
something's going on.
Something's wrong. And what was wrong was they had such low concentrations of oxygen in their basements at this point that it couldn't support a flame. And then one family, a lot of families started complaining of intermittent headaches and intermittent nausea. And it was all intermittent. So people were sleeping even in the winter with all their windows open.
Oh my gosh.
And then one family came downstairs one morning and they had a pet canary. And you know the old story of the canary in the coal mine. The miners used to take canaries down into the coal mines. And if the canary became lethargic or unconscious, they knew that the air quality in the mine was dangerous for people because canaries are more sensitive to carbon monoxide and all of the toxic mine gases. So this family had a pet canary, and when they came downstairs, their pet canary that morning, they all woke up feeling ill, and their pet canary was dead downstairs. And that started right before Todd falls into the earth.
Okay.
And that was what really woke up everybody to the fact that they have been ignoring a problem for too long, and now it's affecting their town and it's affecting their residents, and something has to be done.
That is wild to me because, I mean, you just think about like, I don't know, general sensitivities. Like I'm super sensitive to like mold, you know? So like we actually lived in a house that had like mold damage because our basement flooded. And so like, I just can't imagine living in that sort of constant feeling of like sickness and like not knowing, like, because there's nothing as far as your eye can see that's wrong. You know what I mean? And then just like, you wake up and Petey's dead in the birdcage.
Yeah. Actually, their bird's name was Birdie. I remember that.
Birdie. Oh, Birdie.
Yeah. So, but you know, and I said in our episode, and it's true, like that bird may have saved a lot of lives because it wasn't until that happened that people started being like, oh, we need to be having our houses monitored for these toxic gases. And what's hilarious to me is the government agreed. The government was like, all right, we're going to bring in carbon monoxide detectors. But the carbon monoxide detectors at that time were these massive machines that were like a piece of furniture that's in the corner of your living room.
Right.
And they only had so many of them because they were like about $2,000 each. So you put your name on a waiting list if you wanted your house monitored for carbon monoxide, and you got it for 30 days, and then you had to send it to your neighbor's house. And like, that's
crazy to me.
It's insane.
But then you think, I mean, small mining town. So, I mean, are we talking like just really tiny, you know, like small, super small houses, or is it like a more developed sort of town? Because there's, I mean, so people living there, not many, obviously, but I mean, can you kind of paint a picture of like what the town?
Yeah. So there was a couple grocery stores. There was definitely like sort of like a main road. There was two churches, two big churches, and they had their own private school. The Catholic school is a predominantly Catholic area. And then most of the houses were row homes. So like think of like when you go to like older parts of Baltimore, since I know you're in Maryland. Yeah. You have those areas of row homes. So think of homes like that, throughout town. And it was just, I would say if you think back to like 1960s small town America with like Main Street and their
parade, right? Yeah, they wanted to clean up the town for the parade,
and the town existed because of coal, and coal was the ultimate demise of the town. That's what built the town, was the discovery of anthracite in the region. And as mines opened there, they needed people to work there, and people came there, and then it ended up, the town got built up, and that's how so many towns in the United States started. Was there was some sort of resource there people needed, and as people came to work that resource, you get a town.
It's crazy. And it's still burning.
I just
can't get over, like, I don't know why. For some reason in my brain, I just can't get over the fact that it's still burning and people are still like just living there. Like,
Yeah, and one of the first businesses actually that had to close down was the gas station. There was
well,
a gas
yeah.
station that was owned by a former mayor of the town. And he called one of the mining inspectors because he was like, the wall of my basement is really hot. And like they measured like the wall of his basement, I think was like measuring like, I think near his house, the boreholes were measuring like elevated temperatures. And then they climbed like nearly 100 degrees over a couple days. And so they started monitoring the temperature of the fuel in the underground gas tanks at the gas station. And when the temperature of the fuel started increasing, they were like, nope, we got to get that out of here.
Because it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
Oh, man. There was a town full of praying grandmothers or something. I don't know. So, like, this is crazy to me. Like, all the, like you're right. The bird definitely saved a lot of people's lives. And then if the gas tanks would have blown up, oh, my goodness.
And it turns out that the reason that that particular home and the home next to it had such problems with increasing temperature was because of bootleg mining that had occurred during the Depression. A lot of the mines in the area had closed, and a lot of the miners, were desperate to feed their families, and they didn't own mining rights. And so one guy, the neighbor of the guy that owned the gas station, the people that had owned their house before they did, had dug a bootleg mining access tunnel under their house that they didn't know about because it was filled in. And these bootleggers had actually mined out most of the area under the street, and that wasn't mapped anywhere because it wasn't an official mine. Nobody knew that, this street basically under the street now is just a tunnel straight into people's basements throughout town.
Oh my gosh.
The street could have caved in.
It could have.
Honestly.
Yeah. It reminds me. So because Baltimore is like old and has crappy infrastructure and amazing government that does nothing about it. But like we've had like several sinkholes like throughout the past, couple years, like just like, oh yeah, part of Fells Point just fell into the, whatever. Like here's what this collapsed again. And I'm like, what on? I can't even imagine. Yeah. And then it just like doesn't get cleaned up, and then you still live there. Like that's a hassle enough. But like, yeah.
What's funny is that in the town I live in, there's a house. The town I live in is historic, and it's a mining town, and there is it's a mining town for precious metals. Oh, okay. And there's a home that is now a hotel in our town square. It's historic, and when the current I don't know if it was the current owners or the owners before that, when they bought it, were renovating the basement, and they found a mining shaft in their basement. The people that had owned it and so now they have like a glass top on it, so you can see how deep that they tunneled underneath it. Yeah,
that's crazy. Ugh. I'm claustrophobic, so I don't even want to like think about going into a mine.
No, I don't know how spelunkers and stuff.
So we went to Mexico. One of our like vacations to Mexico was super fun, and we did like all the excursions, and that was one of the excursions. And I'm like really afraid of heights, and I'm just like I'm not super adventure-y when it comes to that sort of stuff. Like I'll go on a hike, but I'm not gonna like, go zip. I ended up zip lining through a jungle, which was terrifying.
I did that too.
Yeah. Like the picture that they're like, oh, look, everyone's doing this and stuff. And I'm like, literally like, I'm going to die. Like the picture is total fear. But I didn't know that was like, it's like, we're just going to go into the cenote here. Just hold on to the rope. And you can like kind of, I just pictured myself like just bouncing off of a wall. No, like it was like spelunking down into a hole in the earth. And I was like, you know what? I hate this. I hate every moment of this.
And the water in cenotes is so cold. Like that, I wasn't prepared for that. Because we went to one that was relatively open. Like didn't feel like I was back in a cave. Like I could see how to get out the whole time. So I was okay with that. When I got in, I was like, I was not prepared for how cold this water is.
No, not at all. And I love that it's like this beautiful portion of the earth, but also I'm terrified and I want to leave.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
Yeah. I just can't imagine. So I can't imagine like thinking it's a good idea to dig. Now that had to have been like a rough tunnel. Like that's a rough tunnel. It's not like, you're actually building it out and it's being a prepared sort of mine that those guys made in the basement, right?
So they dug their own man-made tunnel into the adjacent mine tunnels that had been dug by the mining companies. And then the mining companies would leave towers of anthracite periodically based on structural evaluations for where they needed to be and how big they needed to be to continue to support the ground above. And so these bootleg miners would tunnel into these mines and they would take out those support pillars.
Oh my gosh.
Then that's what they had done from this basement, is they had tunneled into the mine shaft adjacent to the street and taken out the support pillars, bootlegging it.
You Appalachian hillbillies.
You know what? You have to ask yourself, like, what in the Depression, like, how desperate would these people have to be in order to do something that was that? Because they were risking their own lives by taking out these structural supports. The mine could have collapsed while they were down there.
I mean, I would probably imagine that they're so used to that kind of, life-threatening work anyway. You'd have to know at least what you were doing. We hope. Yeah. And then just to get down there and do anything. And yeah, you're right. Like the desperation.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's crazy.
And to me, like the desperation of the parents that were putting their kids to bed at night and leaving their windows open in the dead of winter so that they didn't suffocate in their sleep. I can't imagine how scary that would be.
What year did it start?
The mine fire started in 1962.
Okay.
And it was really like the late 70s, early 80s when they started to realize that it had actually gone past the barrier that the government had put in place to protect the town. And there was a lot of problems with the barrier. They used a fly ash barrier, which I'm sure from your environmental study, that has its own problems. Fly ash is not free of environmental concerns.
Yeah.
But the fly ash wasn't a good solution for the steep grades, and it also settled. So there was openings at the top. And so as the boreholes closer to town started heating up, the government's like, oh no, it's just, there's some openings at the top and it's just the gases are going over. Yeah. And nobody's addressing the fact that this was supposed to be a solid barrier through which the fire can't penetrate. If the gases can get through, the fire can too.
Right.
So
that's crazy. Oh, those poor people. Oh man.
They dealt with a lot. And, as the government was doing more and more gas monitoring in the houses and from the boreholes throughout town, they found not just that it was carbon monoxide, but they started getting increases in carbon dioxide and increases in methane. Methane is explosive in the right concentrations. And they were getting alarms so frequently in the school that the school just unplugged the alarm and were like,
oh my gosh.
They were like, we were having to do 5 and 6 evacuations a day, and we can't function like that. So we're just leaving the windows open and the kids will be fine.
Again, I love that mentality.
So
I don't know. That's a wild, we think about it now, but as parents, it's I would be like, what are you doing, school? I think about the stuff that we complain about now, and it's they're just just open a window.
Some of the parents really did start getting upset because their kids started coming home from school and complaining of feeling more sick at school and more frequently. And so then the parents found out that the alarms were being ignored or unplugged, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah, right. Because they're just we just took care of that. I'm just gonna unplug it and open a window. You guys will be fine.
It makes me very grateful that we can get small, compact, reasonably priced carbon monoxide detectors now. I think you can almost see the edge of mine.
Exactly.
Right?
No, you can totally see yours. Yeah.
So
when it goes off and it beeps and it needs attention, don't ignore it.
I never would. I never would.
Oh my god!
In fact, people come over to my house sometimes and they're like, "Why do you have smoke detectors in every room on upstairs?" I'm like, "Well, my house is a 1-story with a walkout basement, so the ground level is our bedroom level." And I'm like, "You're supposed to have a smoke detector in every bedroom,
every level too,
because you're supposed to sleep with the doors closed."
Oh, really?
You are.
Oh,
I don't.
You're
supposed
either.
to.
Why?
Because in fires that happen at night, so typically it takes about 40 seconds after flaming ignition. So most house fires, you'll see they start from smoldering. And so typically once we get to flaming ignition, we're looking at about 40 seconds before we get your first smoke detector to go off. And if your smoke detectors aren't all wired together, that could be on a different floor of your house or really far away from the sleeping rooms. So by the time you wake up, you could have already been breathing carbon monoxide and all of these toxic fire gases, and you wake up confused and hypoxic.
Oh my
and you
gosh.
reduce the chances of that happening by sleeping with your door closed.
Yeah.
And so that you can wake up with a clear enough head to decide, can I go out this door? Do I need to go out a window or whatever?
Right.
But I have animals and they do not tolerate closed doors. So
Okay.
no judgment to anyone that sleeps with doors open. We do at our house also, but I also have smoke detectors like every 5 feet.
Well, I would
really,
imagine so. Yeah. Like because you probably have seen some wild. Is there so outside of, because I want people to go and listen to the entire case of Centralia. Like, it's weird enough this town is still smoldering underneath. Like, but is there anything outside of that, like a case that just really kind of caught your eye that's like, whoa, this was weird, or weirdly preventable or something like that that sticks out of your brain?
Well, when I first started this podcast, I knew that I was supposed to start it. Like, you ever just have a gut feeling about something? No. But I didn't exactly understand what my why was. Like, What is it? What am I doing here? What's my mission? What am I advocating for? Yeah. And as I've started doing the podcast, I've started covering a lot of wrongful conviction cases. Yeah. And that I realized, I'm like, there's my why. Yeah. So when we talk about arson convictions specifically, arson investigation was like the wild, wild west until the early 2000s, really. And fire investigators were taught to look for these very specific fire signatures. And I talk about these in a lot of the wrongful conviction cases that we cover on the podcast. And they were told, whenever you see these fire signatures, it's definitely arson. There was an accelerant, and it's definitely arson. And they've all been debunked by laboratory testing. So the first wrongful conviction case I covered with my old co-host back in 2022, Jenny, she covered it, and it's the Cameron Todd Willingham case, and it is a heartbreaker of a case. And there's a steep learning curve to podcasting, so I probably will revisit the case again later to talk more about the scientific and technical aspects of it than we did the first time we covered it. Yeah. But he was actually executed. Oh, that's right. For his crime. Oh, and then when we relaunched this past June with my husband as the co-host, we covered the Christine Bunch case. And I actually had the opportunity to interview Christine Bunch, and that interview is also on our podcast. That was awesome. And seeing what happened to her really lit a fire under my butt to make sure that people hear these stories, because I guarantee you there's people sitting in prison right now that were convicted of arson based on these now debunked arson investigation myths. And the more we talk about the problems with the way that arson investigations were done, the better chance these people have of getting innocence projects and law clinics and stuff to take a look at their case, the better chance they have of getting potentially new evidentiary hearings or post-conviction relief. So, I don't want to exhaust people by only covering wrongful conviction cases, because they're really emotional and hard to listen to sometimes. But that one was definitely the Christine Bunch case. I told you I was cooking in my kitchen, and I was listening to that, and I was just like, I had to stop several times and just cry, because it was just like, oh my gosh, this poor woman, just what she went through. I can't even imagine. And, I got emotional when we interviewed her. There's, I interviewed her on Riverside, so I could see her. And there's clips from the video where I'm like, I know, trying to I don't even know how you got through. You definitely do such a fantastic job. You have a really professional, you have so much information that you're conveying in these cases. And I know that there's so much work that you do on the back end. So I just really appreciate it. True crime's tough because, I don't know, we never do anything true crime, because I'm just kind of like, all right, well, either it's been solved or it's unsolved. And a lot of people, my husband, can't stand unsolved anything. And I love that, because there's still that possibility of it being broken, you know what I mean? Break the case or whatever. But yeah, there's so much work and effort that you put in to these cases, and to give voice to that one, especially, guys. I really recommend, obviously, following April on Crime to Burn, but just that Christine Bunch was, oh my gosh, I felt so bad for her. And I think what I realized that I have, what I bring to the true crime community is that I am a fire expert. And we hear a lot of different, true crime podcasters out there. Some of them have access to forensics experts. Some of them have access to, there goes my dog again. Sorry. Some of them have access to like people that work in medical examiner's office and stuff like that. But I didn't hear any other fire experts out there talking about the physics of fire and able to explain to people what the evidence that the investigators found actually means.
Yeah.
And that's when we relaunched in June, I had spent our hiatus trying to figure out what I really wanted, the direction I wanted the podcast to go and what I really wanted to bring to the table. And I realized I didn't want to just bring you news that you can get from a Google search. I wanted to get the court records. I wanted to do the deep dives. I wanted to get the actual evidence that the investigators had. And I wanted to explain to people the physics of fire and how it relates to what the investigators found so that they get that perspective, that was what I could bring to the table that was different.
Yeah.
So that's what I really try to do.
It's so awesome. Yeah. Just
Thanks.
the work that you put in. Oh my gosh. I sent you a case. I don't know if you ever, I know you're super busy, but remember I sent you that Hex Hollow case?
I do. It's in my list.
Okay.
You should.
Okay.
One thing about the podcast growing is that a lot of people have started sending in cases.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are people sending you stuff I have a case for you?
Mm-hmm. I got 3 cases just this week that people sent me. And so it's awesome. But I'm like, I'm going to have to start doing more episodes because I'm not going to be able to cover all these in any kind of timely manner.
Yeah.
So y'all go listen because I need to grow so that I can quit my day job and podcast full time.
Exactly. Just kidding. I know. Everybody, that's everyone's dream except for mine. My poor audience. I haven't, February was just forget it. It was the craziest month ever. And I did nothing. So thanks a lot for being here, guys, because I'm just whatever. I don't know how many people follow, how many people are listening, but they're still here.
Well, I listened in February. So
thank you.
You have me.
Thank you for listening. But it's hard. A lot of, and sometimes I'm I hear other podcasts that are so much bigger, and just oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard. And it's a lot of work. And especially you're pulling records that number one are costly. And then also number 2, having to go through and actually know what you're looking at, it's one thing to look at old newspaper articles. We always kind of talk about that, where you kind of have to sift through either language or sometimes they just kind of, you can tell they were just making up news,
But I was so shocked when I started getting court records, how much of the press information is wrong or misleading. It was really shocking to me. And I think the case that I really pulled the court records for first was the David Michael Crawford serial arson case, which is a case in Maryland. Mm-hmm. He was the former Laurel, Maryland police chief that is accused
crazy too.
of 12 fires across 6 counties. And his oral arguments for his appeal were heard February 10th. And so I've been checking the Maryland Appellate Court page daily, looking for the decision of whether or not he's going to get a new trial. But I went to go get the court records in that case, and I was blown away by how much it was going to cost me. But the court reporter was like, well, you can get, or the court clerk was like, you can get recordings instead of transcripts, and it's cheaper. And I was like, great. So it was still, even recordings was, a third of a mortgage payment.
Well, and then it's still it's a different way of processing the information because you have to listen, go back. Yeah.
I have transcripts now because I typed everything.
Oh my gosh.
I found some software that would slow the audio down for me so that I could type fast enough. Luckily I'm a really fast typer, so I didn't have to slow it down too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I typed, it was about a 2-week trial, and I typed every word.
What?
So that I could refer back to it. Because that was a 10-part series.
Yeah, that was.
And one of the challenges in podcasting, especially true crime podcasting, is metering the story. So when you're doing a big series like this, you don't want to just, here's what happened. Here's the evidence. Here's what they did in court, because it gets too monotonous. And so you sort of need to separate it and break it up in order to meter out the exciting parts of the story so that each episode has the same impact. And so I had to have I had to be able to reference back what happened in the court case so that I could take it apart in a way that made sense for the way that the narrative style I used in that
Right.
storytelling.
What got you interested in fire? Like just the aspects. Were you a pyro? Were you one of those kids?
No, I was trying to skip school.
Okay.
So I grew up in St. Mary's County, Maryland.
Yes.
Which is down between the river and the bay. There's a Navy base down there. My dad was a civil servant. And I was in high school and I was bored out of my mind. And I would notice that there's these guys that had these big pagers and they would just jump up and leave class in the middle of the day. And I was like, why do they get to leave? I want to go. And they're like, well, they're volunteer firefighters.
Oh, that's
the whole
awesome.
county is almost the whole county's home response. And so if they get a call during school, they have to go fight the fire. And I was like, wait, we're teenagers.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, you can be a firefighter down here when you're 16. And I was like,
that's awesome.
So I went and joined the fire department to try to cut class. The problem that I didn't know until after I joined the fire department was that you could only leave school if you were a member of the fire department that was in the same town as our school. And I was 2 districts over because...
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, St. Mary's County is pretty rural, or it was at the time.
Yeah.
It's growing fast. But yeah, so I couldn't leave school, but I did sort of catch the bug. And then I went to the University of Maryland. So when I got to college, I was like, well, I'm not going to keep doing that. Like, I'm going to focus on school. I'm going to be an engineer, an aerospace engineer like my dad.
Oh my gosh.
And I was at school for orientation. I did the last possible orientation. It was like 2 days before I had to move in because I kept putting off scheduling.
Just like putting it off, yeah.
Because ADHD.
Right.
Anyway, and there's a lot of people there that were general engineering, or the undecided engineering. And so they were reading out all the different disciplines that you can major in to give people the syllabus. And they said fire protection engineering. And I was like, what's that? And so it happened to be that one of the people that was running my orientation came over to talk to me and was like, wait, you said you're a firefighter in your hometown. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, did you know if you major in fire protection engineering and you're a volunteer firefighter in the state of Maryland, the state will reimburse part of your tuition?
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so I was like, well, can I double major if I do that? And they were like, yeah. So I went and talked to the head of the department and changed my major. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life. Honestly, truly.
Look at how it brought you to where you are now. You're exposing all of this truth.
And it's been something that has been, I always tell people the best decisions of my life, the most impactful decisions of my life have been something I stumbled into.
Exactly.
I was trying to cut class because I was bored.
I love that.
And then it ended up growing into a career that I feel really passionate about. And, I actually got to combine my love of aerospace with fire protection engineering. When I was in college, I was an intern for NASA.
That's awesome.
I did system safety for shuttle launched payloads at 19.
What?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about that. What that even is.
I was part of a program called Hitchhiker. And that was where anyone in the country could apply to send an experiment up on a shuttle. And so to give you one example, one of the experiments that was applied was a group of kindergartners, I think it was, wanted to send earthworms into space to see if they tunneled differently in zero gravity. So my job was to take their experiment plan and basically, to make it easy to understand, to disaster plan it. What is all the possible things that could go wrong? Like the container breaks and an earthworm gets stuck in a circuit board. What are all the possible things that can go wrong, and would they cause a catastrophic failure? And can we engineer out those potential going wrong? And that was the first step, one of the first steps that they had to make before they decided which experiments would be allowed to go up to space.
That's so cool.
And so, yeah, people ask me all the time, I joke with people well, of course I have anxiety. My entire job is to try to think of the absolute worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, it's
and then try to engineer it out.
Right. That's so cool.
So,
oh wow. So what happened with the Earth? Did they make it?
The earthworms, I believe, made it. Yeah.
Are they there? Are they in space?
I'm pretty sure they're back now.
Okay.
But yeah. And then, I worked there. I was working for a contractor for NASA, and then it just so happened that the contract got got won by a different contracting firm while I was there, and they screwed up the paperwork and accidentally gave me full benefits. So I was in college, and they couldn't take them away because as soon as I got this letter, I was excited. I was like, they think so much of me. They're giving me like a 401k and health insurance and dental and vision. And I signed that, and they couldn't take it back. So the last couple of years I was in college, I was working for NASA getting full benefits. My parents.
So cool.
And it was, and I was really disappointed when I found out it was a mistake. And I was like, oh, and I was fully prepared for them to be like, we can't give you all this. And I was going to be like, okay. But they were like, but you signed the papers and it's a contract's a contract.
Legal
and I was
contract.
like, yes.
Take that, NASA.
So, well, it was NASA's contractor. It wasn't NASA directly,
okay.
But
that is so awesome. Oh man, working for NASA. All right. Well, I have to ask you, like, what do you think about all the UFOs and the alien stuff? Any opinion there?
So I have always believed that there's very little chance that we're alone in the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that there's a good chance that there have been other life forms from more advanced planets or civilizations that have meandered near Earth. Do I think all of the potential sightings or all of the potential activities that people are contributing to these things? No, I don't. But I also don't have any like logical way of saying, well, this is more likely than that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, I'm not really an expert on those things.
Yeah.
So I just,
yeah.
I assume
that's totally fair. There's no right or wrong answer. Yeah.
I assume that when we have solid proof and the government's ready to let us in on the secret, then we'll know.
We'll all be, and Centralia will still be on fire.
And Centralia will still be. Maybe they'll bring some technology to help put out that fire.
That would be great.
That would be awesome.
If you guys are listening out there, if you could just put out the Centralia fire, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things that makes that fire so difficult to put out, a lot of people don't realize, because I kept getting asked, why don't they just flood the mine tunnels? Why don't they just flood the mine tunnels? And so I thought this was like science nerd interesting. I'm a science nerd.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go through the whole chemical process. I actually explain it a little more in depth on our podcast. But when you add water to a anthracite coal fire, it goes through like multiple different reactions, and the final reaction actually liberates the hydrogen out of the water and creates hydrogen gas, which is explosive.
Yeah, so it's just gonna like blow up.
So it actually, trying to flood the tunnels actually can result in explosions.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Would be my first. I'd just be like, get the hose. Like, I just picture like people in, like Baltimore, like Highlandtown, like spraying. Like if this happened in Dundalk, we would just be like spraying it with our hoses. I'm just like, yeah, take that. No.
So it's there's just a lot of challenges. And then that hydrogen can travel away from the seat of the fire. And if it comes into contact with heat or, something that causes it to ignite, you can get fires that are remote from even the main fire because of the gasification of hydrogen that occurs in anthracite fires. It was all really fascinating,
yeah. And it's eerie. Like if you look at the pictures, it's just so eerie. Like Ghost Town,
the steam come up out of the ground, especially in the winter, and like seeing areas where the snow has melted.
Yeah.
And you can clearly see that there's a mine tunnel there.
That's where like Silent Hill imagery for sure.
And then I think one of the things that really got me, and I talked about it in the episode, was when they were doing one of the projects to try to stop the fire from reaching the town. They dug out part of a trench, and they were saying that from the town, you could just look towards the horizon and just see like the brimstone, like the wall of this pit that they were digging was just all flaming coal. And it's just, I'm like, it's baffling to me that I have never seen a coal mine fire in real life.
Yeah.
But in studying this one, I learned a lot about the challenges and the differences between, fighting a fire in the bituminous region versus fighting a fire in the anthracite region. And I didn't even know what bituminous and anthracite coal were before I started researching Centralia.
Yeah, I had no idea. You just think of coal,
Coal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Ugh. So
and there's conspiracy theories about Centralia.
Oh, let's hear them.
So a lot of people accuse the government of not controlling the fire because they said that since the town itself owned the mining rights below the town's land, that they think that they wanted to use eminent domain, which is what they did use to buy out the people that had to leave. And they said they wanted to use eminent domain to get those coal rights to all that anthracite. Now, I disagree because the anthracite coal started declining during the Second World War, and it never really rebounded. It had some brief resurgences, but even at the time when the fire started, the reduction in value of anthracite was so massive that it would have been a really dumb gamble.
There's no need for it. Like, there was no...
And in 62 years, we haven't seen anyone go in there and start digging out the town yet. So I think it's I think we can put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
That conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And plus, that conspiracy theory would have had to make it over, not just over multiple years, but over multiple different administrations, both, Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, and at 3 and 4 different levels of government. And I just don't think that a conspiracy of that nature could have survived that long.
I wouldn't put it past the government, but I see what you're saying, because it's like that, in theory, that file would have to be on multiple desks, and it's like this little tiny, like, why, what are you guys really hiding? I can't imagine it being anything like that deep, Are there any other ones besides the more, those governmental, or there's nothing like eerie and paranormal going on? Like, it's just a straight up scientific coal fire.
I haven't heard of anything eerie and paranormal, but if anyone has, you can email me at crimetoburn@gmail.com. But, there was a little bit of hubbub around 2020, around the quarantine, because that's when the highway that goes into Centralia was deemed to, it had become like almost a tourist destination.
Really?
Graffiti highway, because the highway was closed and people would go there, and there's areas where the highway was splitting open and you could see the steam coming up.
Yeah.
And it became just absolutely covered in graffiti. It was called Graffiti Highway. And
cool.
the company that owns the land around there came and brought in like hundreds of dump truckloads full of dirt, and they covered the highway to try to discourage people from visiting, because they felt it was getting too dangerous, because the highway was, they think the highway was in danger of collapsing. And
at some point it's all gonna,
technically the whole area is in danger of collapsing, but
right. So what happens like after, obviously the people that are still living there are just living in danger, and they're doing this at their own risk. So let's fast forward to when those people leave. Is there a plan? You don't have to get into it if it I don't want to give the whole episodes away, but is it just going to keep burning, or is it just going to implode into itself?
No, in fact, the fire doesn't stay in one place. It keeps moving, and it's likely that the fire is now beyond the area where the people that are still living there are living. It doesn't mean that they're not necessarily being exposed to potentially toxic gases that are still traveling through the existing mines that could travel back to where they live. But experts have they initially estimated that the fire would burn for somewhere around 500 years. Newer estimates have been closer to 200 to 250 years. So, we're not even halfway there for the fire to burn out. And unless anthracite coal has some huge resurgence and somebody sees value in going in there and digging out this fire, then it probably won't ever be put out. Or unless some amazing new technology arises that makes it much easier to extinguish.
Or if the mountains trolls open up and then just take it. That's where
something.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll tie in Lord of the Rings to anything.
So will my husband.
We just need some of that action. Just a dragon. I don't know.
Just a dragon.
I have to make it weird. Oh man, April, I'm so glad you came on.
I'm so glad that we finally came up with something that we could talk about that would interest your listeners and give you a chance to talk about what we do over here at Crime to Burn.
Yeah. You guys have to go follow Crime to Burn on your. So tell everybody where they can follow and find you.
So we're on Instagram, X, Facebook, and begrudgingly Twitter. not Twitter, sorry, TikTok.
TikTok.
I was like I joined TikTok at Thanksgiving last year, so it was literally like right before.
How's it going over there?
You know what?
We're not on TikTok.
It's a weird place. If you're not used to it, like I'm very used to Instagram, and I will freely admit I am in my late 40s now. I have learning to do a reel on Instagram was a huge deal for me. Like I had to Google and watch YouTube videos on how to make reels. And then I had to start a YouTube channel and I had to watch YouTube videos on how to do that. And like I knew nothing about social media. So joining TikTok was really scary for me because it's so different. The algorithm's so different. But I have made contact with some amazing people over there and we're growing slowly. I feel like organic growth is easier on TikTok.
It is.
But you also get a lot of trash in your organic growth.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I was on TikTok. I had to like really prayerfully consider like, okay, where am I putting this thing? Because if you spread your net like too wide, then you're just like all over the place. So I was like, again, yeah, and I'm 42. So I'm like, I have a life and a family and I want this to be like as small as possible so I can manage it without it like exploding. I did TikTok for like a month and I was like, I can't, like, this is just too, I don't know what it is, but I guess for me, it was just way too addicting. And I just found myself on it like way too much. And I
get annoyed with it. And I think it's, somebody messaged me and was like, hey, I followed you. And then I unfollowed you and followed you again. And I keep hoping you're going to follow me. And I was like, I was trying to curate my feed like I do on Instagram, where I don't always follow everyone that follows me. Like,
yeah, I don't either.
And I was trying to treat it more like a billboard. And I think because there's so much more opportunity to make money on Instagram, people expect you to follow. So then I was like, fine, you know what? If you follow me, your account is not offensive. And I don't think that you're just trying to sell your OnlyFans or whatever.
Yeah.
Then, I'll follow you back. Fine. But the result of that has been that when I go to like my friend's feed, that I get a plethora of stuff that is not as interesting to me as when I had a curated feed. So it actually makes it easier for me to spend like 10 minutes and then just put it down.
And then you're done.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. I'm most comfortable on Instagram. And, people can always email me directly. I do respond to my emails. And luckily, we're small enough now that I have the ability to, if people direct message me or email me, that I can still respond to everybody.
Yeah.
So for now, that's the plan. That's where people can find us. And I always tell everyone, for any podcast that you love, especially for us little guys, anytime you like our content, watch the whole reel. Believe it or not, the watch time on the reel is exceptionally important for the algorithm to push you out.
And sharing.
Leave comments and share it to your stories, or even DM it to your friends, or just add it to your favorites.
Yeah.
Those are things that the algorithm is looking for. And then the more interesting the algorithm thinks you are, the more people it'll push it out to. And really, what we're trying to do is just find our audience. Like, I'm not trying to like shove my stuff down people's throat that don't want it. I'm just trying to get it out there in front of new people that haven't heard of us yet.
Well, that's what you're doing tonight. Yay!
Yay! Thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Oh man, anytime. So yeah, if you ever have any time and you want to dive into the Hex Hollow case, it's just like a weird little, like, again, Pennsylvania. So my Pennsylvania listeners, you guys know what I'm talking about. We haven't covered it technically on the podcast, but I've talked to a couple different people about it, and we like kind of talk about it. Crystal and I went to this place. It basically, like, these people like set this guy on fire and his body burned, but the house didn't burn down. And it was really weird. So there's like, it's totally on brand for us because it's like a weird fire and then like witchcraft. So it like kind of goes together. Like, people thought it was a supernatural thing, but I would love to get your feedback on like, well, what would be the reason? And I know you need all the details, so that's why I kind of sent it to you. But
yeah, so I will look into it. And also, maybe one day we can talk about spontaneous human combustion.
I was gonna ask you about that, but then I was like, no, I'm in love with Centralia right now. So
yeah, I did talk to John over at Dairyland Frights about spontaneous human combustion. And there's a lot of people that think that there's a divinity or supernatural aspect to it. And what I tell everybody when I talk about things like that is like, I'm an expert on the physics of fire.
Yeah.
I'm not a paranormal researcher.
Right.
I'm not an expert in divinity. I'm not an expert in all these other things. So I can tell you whether or not science can explain something and what their best explanation is. But by doing that, I'm not discounting the possibilities of these other things. I'm just not an expert in those things. And I'm not gonna talk out of my lane of expertise. So that's the one caveat I always throw out there, is that I don't want to offend anybody that's like, oh, you're trying to explain it with science, but I'm just telling you what science can say, and then you have to decide based on what people that are experts in paranormal research and
a lot of the stuff and what you're getting into is stuff that is measurable. That is very, very science based, and it is something that can be measured and looked at, and you can really you're kind of solving a mystery, and that's why I really like what you do, because it's very, I guess, definitive is what the word
it can be, but when we look at wrongful conviction cases, we see that we still get science wrong.
Yeah, we still
sometimes.
get it wrong. Yeah. But spontaneous human combustion, it's so funny that you said that, because I was like, maybe we could talk about that one time. My uncle apparently, I don't know, I had a weird uncle that knew someone that that happened. And ever since then, I'm like, what? You just blow up? It's crazy.
You know what? I feel like science has a really good explanation for the people that passed away and spontaneously human combusted.
Yeah.
But did you know that there's cases of survivors that witnessed cases of people that supposedly burst into flames? Now, I don't know these people from Adam, so I don't know that they're telling the truth. But there is a case, I know of at least one case in Florida and one case in Tennessee where people allegedly spontaneously burst into flames in front of witnesses, and they were able to be put out and treated for their injuries. And so, maybe there's more than one thing at play. Maybe we do have scientific explanations for some of these, and we don't for other. I have no explanation. I cannot come up with a scientific explanation that makes sense for those cases if they're really true. But they're witnessed and there's statements about them. So who knows?
Okay. Yes, stay tuned, guys. We have to do this because we talked about it for at least 10 minutes, so now we have to do it.
Okay.
Well, April, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, guys, go follow April at Crime to Burn, and until next time, I don't even know. I just do a whole little thing that I do. I add at the end. I don't have a closing tagline, so I don't even know why I did that.
I don't either. What's funny is I've been doing Info Inferno on our social media.
That too, yeah.
Where I talk about unhinged fire news that I've come up with, and at the end of those, I go, "Make good choices, y'all." So make good choices, y'all.
Make good choices. All right, and I'll talk to you guys later. Whatever. You have been listening to Sasquatch and Sourdough. I'm Christina, and thank you so much for tuning in. Sasquatch and Sourdough is so much more than just a podcast. We're a community of kindred spirits, united by our curiosity and fascination with the extraordinary. And we want to bring you into the conversation. So whether you've had a brush with the unexplainable, seen something that you can't quite wrap your head around, this is your space. We invite you to join us as we break bread and break down the barriers between the known and the unknown. If you want to share your story, you can email us at sasquatchandsourdough@gmail.com or send us a DM on Instagram. Until next time, remember, the truth is out there, God is with you, and everyone always ends up in the kitchen.